but because you're finally choosing you. This isn't about cutting people off. It's about cutting the cord between your worth and your availability. When you stop being available, you stop being taken for granted. People get too comfortable when they know you'll always answer the phone, always show up, always say yes. They start to expect it. Your constant presence becomes their safety net, their backup plan, their go-to option when their world falls apart. And the truth is, the more you show up without hesitation, the more invisible your effort becomes. It's not that they don't see you, it's that they stop realizing how much you're giving. You make things easier, smoother, lighter for them, but that effort fades into the background because it's always there. You train people to think your yes is automatic, and once that happens, they stop recognizing its value. The moment you pull back, it confuses them. They start questioning what's changed, but nothing's changed. You just stopped allowing your worth to be measured by your availability. It's not punishment. It's protection. Protection of your time, your boundaries, your energy. And now that you're not instantly available, people finally feel the space you used to fill so effortlessly. That space feels uncomfortable for them because it forces them to face just how much they leaned on your presence. They thought your help, your presence, your effort came with no cost, but it always cost you something. Time you didn't have, energy you couldn't spare, peace you were silently sacrificing. You start noticing the shift in how they talk to you, how they reach out. At first, there's confusion, maybe a little attitude, because when you were available 24/7, they didn't have to think about how you were doing or if you were okay. You were always there, always fixing, always showing up, always supporting, and now that you're not immediately responding, they feel it. That gap feels personal, even if it's not. But the truth is, your pullback isn't about them. It's about finally putting yourself first. You begin to understand that showing up for everyone else came at the cost of not showing up for yourself. And once you see that clearly, there's no going back. You remember all the times you gave a yes that should have been a no, all the moments you put your own needs on the back burner just to be there for someone else who wouldn't have done the same for you. You start replaying those scenes in your head, times when you were exhausted but still showed up, times when your kindness was met with silence or worse, entitlement. Those moments hit different when you're no longer caught up in them. You see them with new eyes from a distance that brings truth. You also begin to realize how much you were stretching yourself thin. You were overextending, overcommitting, over-delivering just to maintain relationships that were only alive because you were watering them. Without your constant effort, they dry out. And at first that's hard to watch, but eventually it becomes freeing because you understand that real connection doesn't fade when you set boundaries. Real respect doesn't disappear when you stop being endlessly accessible. If anything, it strengthens. The ones who truly see you, they step forward. They ask how you're doing instead of what you can do for them. Pulling back also helps you find your own rhythm again. You're no longer on everyone else's timeline. You're not adjusting your schedule to make space for people who wouldn't do the same. You're finally listening to what you need instead of silencing yourself to keep the peace. You move slower, more intentional. Your days aren't crammed with other people's priorities. You give your time to what actually matters to you, not what pressures you. And in that shift, you begin to feel more grounded, more whole, more in control of your own life. When you stop being available, you start hearing your own voice. The world is loud. People are constantly talking, needing, asking, expecting. And when you're always available, you're always absorbing. You carry the weight of their problems, their emotions, their chaos, all while silencing your own thoughts. Your mind becomes a waiting room for other people's needs, and somewhere in that noise, your own voice gets buried. You wake up thinking about what someone else needs from you, go to sleep wondering if you did enough for everyone else, and somewhere in between, you forget to check in with yourself. You're on autopilot, always reacting, never reflecting. The shift starts when you pause. Not a dramatic exit, just a quiet decision to stop answering every call, to let a message sit unread, to cancel something that doesn't serve your peace. And in that pause, something strange happens. The noise starts to fade, not all at once, but enough for you to start noticing it was there. Enough for you to realize how much space other people were occupying in your head. And when that space clears, even a little, your own thoughts start to speak up. Gently at first, thoughts that say you're tired, that say you need rest, that say you've been giving too much and asking too little. And the more you listen, the louder they become. You begin to hear yourself in moments you used to ignore, in the silence after a skipped call, in the stillness of a declined invite, in the gap between messages when you don't rush to respond. That silence that used to feel uncomfortable starts to feel necessary. It becomes a buffer between you and the demands of the world. It gives you room to breathe, room to ask what you really want, what actually matters, what's been missing. And in that stillness, you find parts of yourself that were buried under all that busyness. You realize you were never really present in your own life. You were just playing a role in everyone else's story. You start noticing what drains you and what feeds you, the people, the routines, the conversations. You see them clearly now. You're no longer too distracted to question why you always feel exhausted after certain interactions or why you dread certain commitments. With space and distance, patterns become obvious. And in that clarity, you find your power. You're not just reacting anymore. You're choosing how to spend your time, choosing what you let in, choosing when and where your energy goes. And it's not selfish, it's survival, because your peace is not a luxury. It's your baseline. Without it, everything else crumbles. That voice inside you begins to feel trustworthy again. It stops second guessing, stops seeking validation, stops editing itself to fit other people's comfort. You stop over-explaining your boundaries, stop apologizing for your silence, stop shrinking just to keep the peace. You become more rooted in your own truth, and it feels solid, not loud or aggressive, just steady, a quiet kind of strength that doesn't need approval. You're not asking anyone to understand. You're just honoring what you've ignored for too long. And in that space, you begin to heal. You begin to rebuild trust with yourself. Every time you choose rest over obligation, every time you choose silence over chaos, every time you say no without guilt, you reclaim a part of you that was lost. This journey isn't about isolation. It's about alignment. It's not about pushing people away. It's about pulling yourself back in. You can't be available to everyone if you're unavailable to yourself. And now you see that clearly. You realize you were never meant to be everything to everyone. You were meant to be whole, steady, and clear on who you are. Even if that means fewer calls, fewer texts, fewer approvals, because in that less, you gain more. You gain you. When you stop being available, you learn the difference between being needed and being used. It's one of those lessons that doesn't come with a loud announcement or a clear warning. It sneaks up on you after years of giving and wondering why you feel so empty. People don't always come into your life with the intention to use you, but when you keep showing up without boundaries, they get used to the access. They start calling on you not because they respect your time, but because they know you won't say no. And you confuse that pattern for purpose. You think being needed equals being valued, when really, it often just means being convenient. There's a subtle but powerful shift that happens when you pull back. You stop picking up the phone right away. You don't jump into fixing mode the second someone has a problem. And that pause, that hesitation, it reveals more than words ever could. You start to notice who checks in only when they want something, who gets distant when you're not useful, who accuses you of changing the second you stop catering to their chaos. The reactions speak volumes, because when you're no longer easy to access, some people take it as a personal attack. But it's not about them. It's about your growth. You're no longer performing emotional labor just to keep your spot in someone else's life. Being used never looks obvious in the beginning. It looks like being the reliable one, the one everyone turns to, the strong friend, the dependable sibling, the partner who always understands, and you wear those roles like armor thinking they protect your place in people's lives. But what they really do is deplete you, because behind every favor you didn't want to do, every late night conversation that left you drained, every moment you silenced your needs to keep someone else calm, behind all of that is a pattern of being needed in ways that ignore your well-being. And once you stop playing that part, you realize just how heavy it really was. You also begin to see the emotional transactions for what they were. There were moments you mistook dependence for love. You believed that if someone came to you with their problems, it meant they trusted you. And maybe they did, but trust without reciprocity is still imbalance. You kept giving more than you got, and over time it stopped feeling like connection and started feeling like obligation. The truth is, love without respect becomes a burden, and respect means recognizing when someone has nothing left to give and choosing not to take more from them anyway. When you stop being available, the absence forces people to evaluate what they really saw you as. And that can hurt, because you're not just learning about them, you're learning about yourself. You're seeing where your boundaries were missing, where your need to feel important overpowered your need to feel safe. You're realizing that part of being used was tied to your desire to be seen, to matter, to belong. And you gave people pieces of yourself, hoping it would make you feel whole. But wholeness never comes from overextending. It comes from knowing where you end and someone else begins. And that kind of clarity only shows up when you step back far enough to see the pattern. You begin to separate your identity from your availability. You stop feeling guilty for not fixing everything, for not being the emotional landing pad for everyone's mess. You recognize that your value doesn't come from how much you endure. It comes from how much you honor yourself. And honoring yourself means not answering every call, not rescuing every time, not showing up just because someone expects you to. You're not cold, you're clear, you're not selfish, you're self-aware. And that difference becomes your filter. You stop asking who needs you and start asking who values you when you're not giving. When you stop being available, your energy stops leaking. You don't even realize how much of yourself you've been giving away until you finally pause. You think you're just helping, just being supportive, just being a good friend, a good sibling, a good partner. But slowly, piece by piece, you're being pulled in 100 directions that aren't your own. You're showing up for everyone except you. And it feels normal because you've done it for so long. But normal doesn't mean healthy. Every yes you gave when your body needed rest. Every call you answered when your mind needed quiet. Every time you pushed your own needs aside to keep someone else from falling apart. That wasn't free. That cost you something. Your energy is your life force. It fuels your thoughts, your peace, your growth, your healing. And when it's constantly being drained by things that don't serve you, you begin to feel detached from yourself. Tired for no reason, short-tempered, disconnected from joy. You're moving through life like a battery that never recharges. And people around you don't notice because you've mastered the art of being there for them while being completely absent for yourself. But the second you start saying no, the second you pull back to refill your own cup, things shift. Not because the world changed, but because you finally did. You begin to notice how much you were pouring into people who never checked if your glass was even full. You realize how often you gave your time, your attention, your care without even being asked. You just did it. You saw the need and moved. But now you're watching those same people fall silent when you need support. You're watching those same people call you different when you don't overextend. And that's when you realize it was never about mutual care. It was about convenience. They were used to the version of you that ignored your limits. They were comfortable with the version that kept giving, even when it hurt. When you start protecting your energy, the world calls it distant, but it's not distance, it's direction. You're choosing where your energy goes, and more importantly, where it doesn't. You're no longer giving it to arguments that don't matter, to people who don't listen, to tasks that drain your spirit. You don't owe everyone a response. You don't owe everyone your time. You don't have to keep proving your loyalty through exhaustion, because true loyalty begins with yourself. And when you honor that, you start moving differently, more grounded, more steady, more whole. The clarity that comes with protecting your energy is powerful. You wake up without the fog. You enter rooms without anxiety. You're no longer preoccupied with how others see you because you've started seeing yourself. And in that space, you begin to rebuild. You begin to invest in the parts of your life that fill you instead of depleting you. You spend time with people who pour back into you. You say yes only when it aligns. You say no without apology. Your presence becomes intentional. Not everyone gets it, and that's okay, because the goal was never to be understood. It was to be at peace. When you stop being available, the right people start stepping up. It's easy to think that if you're not constantly showing up, constantly reaching out, constantly being the one to initiate, that everything will fall apart. But the truth is, that kind of pressure was never yours to carry. You were holding relationships together with effort that wasn't being matched, trying to keep everyone close by being the glue, the planner, the comfort, the presence. And somewhere along the line, you started mistaking your effort for connection. But connection without effort from both sides isn't love, it's dependence. And the moment you stop making yourself constantly available, the dynamic begins to reveal itself. You start to see who was only there because you were always accessible. You start to see which connections were built on your effort alone. And it can sting realizing how many relationships were being propped up by your availability. But that pain brings clarity, because now instead of assuming you're valued just because someone keeps coming around, you start watching what happens when you're not the one always reaching out. And some people fade, some people pull back, some people go silent. And that's not rejection, that's truth. You finally see who shows up when it's not convenient, who puts in the effort when it's not easy. The right people don't let distance create disconnect. They don't disappear just because you stop chasing. They notice the silence, they feel the shift, and they step in. Not because they need something, but because they care. And that kind of care doesn't require constant availability. It doesn't rely on you doing all the work. It breathes. It moves both ways. It respects your space without punishing you for taking it. And when you experience that, you realize how rare it really is. You start to appreciate the people who don't make you earn their presence by overextending yourself. You're no longer trying to be liked by everyone. You're focused on being aligned with the right ones, the ones who see your boundaries and respect them, the ones who don't call your distance attitude, who don't label your silence as weakness. They see your peace and protect it with you. They know how to show up, not just when you're available, but when you're absent.